Hello, I'm Cambrell Marshall once again. Thank you for this Newsmakers Extra. We are talking about the obligations and the rights of landlords versus renters. And we're talking about, you mentioned earlier, Rick, about insurance. I saw a report that said 2% of renters have rental insurance. That sounds a little low, but does that sound about right from what you guys know about renters insurance in the...
Over the past, I'd say about 5 to 7 years, the apartment industry has gone more towards requiring renters insurance. So people may have it at the beginning of their lease. They should be maintaining it under their lease. A lot of landlords don't check this. So if a resident, let it lapse, then they let it lapse. But most people should have renters insurance.
And renters insurance, altogether different than flood insurance, but you can have flood insurance as a renter as well, correct?
Right. Right. Yeah. One of the key things, as Howard was mentioning there, that when the tenants get in a situation where they have a permanently or totally unusable apartment, they could terminate the lease. It gets real difficult for tenants if it's only partially unusable, because then the lease would control, as Howard mentioned, and if they want a rent reduction, they have to go to court to ask a judge at the county or district court level to reduce their rent for that proportion. So that's a real problem for tenants.
I've seen reports where some of the people who are renting were moved to different properties. If they were moved out, if the landlord could do that, and I think that may be dealing with some of the areas where you talked about landlord compassion, really. They were being compassionate. They're going, maybe they didn't have to do that, but it's an obligation, or is it not an obligation?
Landlords have no obligation to transfer a resident of a damaged unit to another unit. A resident has no obligation, if the lease is terminated, to stay there, to go stay at the property or go to a transferred unit. The only thing the law does say on transfer, which is something that came into play a couple legislative sessions ago, is that if there is a transfer in a natural disaster, a landlord cannot require the resident to sign a new lease for a longer term than pre-disaster. So if you had 2 months left on your lease pre-Harvey and you were transferring, the landlord could not require you to sign a new lease for 12 months at an upper floor unit or whatever to transfer with the same landlord. Now, residents can agree to a new 12-month lease or a new lease, but the landlord can't require it.
Mold is a big issue these days. Have you been finding that you've been getting those kind of complaints about mold, and who cleans it up, and when do I need to go back into my apartment if the landlord says mold is there or not there?
That's a major problem even before this last hurricane. Mold is a real difficult issue for both landlords and for tenants. Basically, if you're a tenant dealing with mold, my suggestion always is, and advice is, go get a professional, check it out, see if it's dangerous mold, if it's really something that's going to affect your health or safety that the landlord has to basically make a diligent effort to fix. Some people get a little hysterical, oh, there's some mold, but it's not any kind of dangerous mold. But it's a real difficult issue for tenants if there is mold there, or for landlords when mold is suggested that it's there by the tenant. So it's an issue that's best worked out between the people. There's a lot of addendums, a lot of stuff with the leases about mold specifically now in the multifamily units, the Houston Apartment Association type leases. In some individual leases, that person rents their house, there may not be as much. They may have used some lease they got off the internet or something rather than a professionally prepared lease.
What's the biggest challenge that you have as representing an organization like the Houston Apartment Association? What's the biggest challenge you have in terms of trying to make sure that people have a sense that the landlords are going to do the right thing, and it's not a them against us kind of scenario?
Well, it always starts with the landlord is not liable simply because there's mold. A landlord becomes liable if they know about something, they should have fixed it, and they don't fix it. There's some steps a resident has to say to hold them responsible for certain damages, but basically what I look at mold as, it's a maintenance issue. If you get notice of it, you have to take the proper steps, do the right things, to be prompt and correct, okay? Do the right things promptly, and you shouldn't have an issue. Some of the problems we're seeing is that, and from the resident side, notify your landlord when you see signs of mold. You know, even if you, and we've gone into units where 6 months after the fact, they tell us. They live there, we don't. We need them to notify us of the mold. That's of course not related to the natural disaster.
Sure.
Natural disaster, if you have water in your unit, you're trying to abate the mold before it even gets going. And that's where the health and safety issues come in.
What would you tell those people who say, I don't know where to turn? And you're doing it from two different angles. You from the consumer, you from the apartment. What do you tell them the best contact information to get in contact with whom to deal with their issues?
Well, at the University of Houston Law Center, we have a consumer complaint center. We have a call-in line. People can go on our website, find the information about the hurricane that they could call in and get some advice. The Houston Volunteer Lawyers Program, done by the Houston Bar Association, takes a lot of cases. The local legal aid office, what is Lone Star Legal Aid. So those are good resources for people on the tenant side to try to get some assistance.
Howard?
We also, at the Houston Apartment Association, there is a resident relations department, and the number is 713-595-0300, and it takes calls. Somebody will answer your call between the hours on Wednesdays from 9 o'clock a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. and from Thursday, so today 9 to 1 and then 2 to 4 in the afternoon. Fridays 9 to 1, 2 to 4 in the afternoon. So if you have an issue with your landlord, call the Houston Apartment Association, and they might be able to get a hold of your landlord, might be able to help.
And if neither one of those happens, and maybe it's Judge Judy, huh?
Well, there's one other option here. We have at the University of Houston Law Center, we have People's Law School coming up at the end of the month, September 30th. It's a free program, and there'll be informational sessions about FEMA, insurance, landlord-tenant law, consumer law, and a number of others. Free program. It's all Saturday morning on September 30th at the University of Houston Law Center.
Very helpful. And I was just kidding. We hope never to go to court. Let's get it resolved, okay? Howard, Rick, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for having us.
Good luck.
Thank you for having us.
Make sure you didn't keep those complaints to a minimum. Both of you.
We're trying.
Thank you for tuning in as well.